بینەران و بیسەرانی ڕووداو سڵاوتان لەبێ میوانی بڕگەی سەرتێشتیان جارەمان بەڕێز یاکۆ پیرەندیس کنسوڵی گشتی هۆڵندای لە هەرێمی کوردستان. جەنابی کنسوڵ سپاس بۆم دەرفەتە.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
ئێوە وڵاتی گوڵن، بەڵامەوە نزیکەی کاژێرێکە لێرەین چاوم خشان هیچ گوڵێکی جوان لێرە بەدی ناکەین بۆ کەشوهای کوردستان گونجاو نییە بۆ گوڵی هۆڵندی.
No, the environment of Kurdistan is excellent for flowers, especially now in winter. That is not the issue. I think it has to do more with the fact that we are quite busy and we are out of the office more than we are spending time here. So we have plants, but no flowers, you're right. Yeah.
کاتمە ژوورە و یەکسەر ینی چاوم کەوتە سەر دوو کارتۆن هەناری هەڵەبجا، هەناری کوردستان. هیچ تامت کردوون هەناری کوردستان؟
Not specifically for the pomegranates. However, I must say the pomegranates you're referring to was a present from the Prime Minister's office, and it was actually the second present that we got for pomegranates. They taste delicious, and I saw that the Prime Minister was making a big effort to make sure that these Kurdish goods get exported to other places in the region. For us, we did not intervene so much in pomegranates, but we did act in other agricultural sector, and for us that has been mostly the potato sector for agri-food.
بەڵێ چیەکەن بۆەوەی ئێستا هەناری کوردستان گەیشتە ئیمارات، وڵاتانی دیکە عەرەبی و چەند وڵاتێکی دیکە ئەوروپیش. ئێوە چیەکەن بۆ هەوڵەدەن لە داهاتوودا ئێوەش وەکو هۆڵەندا هەناری کوردستان ببەمەوە هۆڵەندا؟
What we are trying to do is not so much investing on trade, because, for instance, the pomegranates, but also other sectors, you of course have trade where you export certain products to the region or to other countries. What we are trying to do more is to invest in agriculture, in sectors that we think can provide the products to the region and to the country itself. The fact is that in the Kurdistan region, there is a lot of vegetables and fruits coming from the region, coming from Turkey, coming from Iran, while the products from Kurdistan itself are not always distributed. So what we're trying to do is to invest in those sectors where we can also make sure that the Kurdistan as a market, an internal market, yields from that aspect. So not so much for the export.
ئێستا چ بەرهەمێکی ناوخۆی هەرێمی کوردستان و جوتیارانی هەرێمی کوردستان دەچێتە هۆڵندا؟
We have some exports going on to Netherlands, but again what we are trying to do more is to invest in technology and more innovative ways of producing food. If you allow me, let me give you an example. What we try to do is make the techniques of, for instance, growing tomatoes here in the country much more productive. And as you probably know, water is a big problem, and especially with climate change, water is getting even more so a problem. So what we try to do is bring in new techniques where, for instance, certain products do not grow in the soil, but they grow in artificial layers where we recycle water. And that means that if you produce food that way, you use, instead of, for instance, 60 liters of water for 1 kilo of tomatoes, you use only 4 liters of water. And that's what we try to do in helping Kurdistan in more techniques and innovative ways of producing agri-food. In agri-food, we have basically 3 different pillars. The first pillar is the support of the Kurdistan regional government in policy. So we try to help the Ministry of Agriculture in developing policies in which they can develop the sector as a whole. The second is that we have a number of demo farms in which we try to have farmers and students see what the different techniques are for producing food. And then the third one is where we invest together with companies in using these techniques and producing food. And that is, for instance, in the potato industry, which I mentioned, where we have a lot of, let's say, in the value chain of growing potatoes. We have many of the aspects that we exported from the Netherlands. That means, for instance, the seedlings, so where you grow a tomato, all the way through storage and production of, for instance, potato chips.
پرۆژەی پرتەقاڵتانەیە گۆشەی پرتەقاڵ ئەو پرۆژەیە چییە چەنێ هەلیکاری ڕەخساندووە بودجەکەی چۆنە وردەکاری و پرۆژەیە چییە؟
Orange Corners is a project where we focus on young entrepreneurs. What we try to do is with Orange Corners is to offer a package for young entrepreneurs, Kurdish entrepreneurs, that have an idea on building a business, but sometimes do not have yet the right knowledge, expertise and guidance to get it to be successful. So what we try to do is we train them. First we make a selection, of course, of those proposals that are most promising. We would then guide them and try to train them and then help them develop their business. And some of these businesses are very successful. Not long ago there was one of the entrepreneurs that sold their business for quite a number of US dollars. And others will continue, and we try to basically help this region and the government to create an environment where entrepreneurship, building the private sector, is growing, and that is something I think is really needed in the Kurdistan region.
وەکو قۆنسوڵی نوێ چیت کردوتە کاری لە پێشینێت و زیاتر بەنیازی فۆکەست لەسەری بێ لەو ماوەی کە لە هەرێمی کوردستان کار دەکەی و بە تەمای لە پەیوەندی نێوان هەولێر و هۆڵندا هەرێمی کوردستان و هۆڵندا ینی پەرەی پێ بدەی زیاتر پێش بکەوێ.
Yeah, well, I think if you get to a new place as a diplomat, of course, there's always the history of what is already being done, and there's certain things that you need to do in your job. But then there's aspects that you yourself are passionate about and that you want to add to your work. To start with the first part, big part of our work here is consular driven because we have such a big amount of Dutch Kurdish people here. So we deal with a lot of consular affairs, and that is part of our core business, I would say. Then next to that, we talked about agriculture and developing the agricultural sector. We try as much as possible to focus and put our strength in a specific sector, because I also think it's much more logical and it has much more strength if we focus on a certain area instead of doing everything at once with the capacity we have. Then thirdly, we are working very much on the security sector here in Kurdistan. So what we also have definitely as one of our core activities is working on the Peshmerga reform, which I'm pretty sure you will get to in your interview. So that is also the security and the stability of Kurdistan is very much in our interest, but also in the interest of Kurdistan itself. So that's also a big topic that we work on. And on all these topics, I'm very much inspired and looking forward to interact with the society here, because for me, as a relatively newcomer, it has been a great joy to interact with Kurdish people. Very friendly, very hospitable. So for me, it's very enjoyable.
رازين لە چاکسازیەکانی وەزارەتی پێشمەرگە؟
Yes and no. Of course, things can be better. But also we shouldn't forget that we have already accomplished quite a number of things. In my last interaction with the Prime Minister, I think he put it quite well. He said this is a process that is going on, but it is slow, but it is steady. And in a long process that is slow but steady, you have ups and downs. There are periods where things are more difficult, and there's times where things really progress very rapidly. I think we are now in a period where it's more difficult. It's definitely more difficult because the political tensions are there, and the political tensions between the two main political parties also make that the reform of the two armies, the 70s and the 80s, which is of course the main goal of the Peshmerga reform, to bring those under one umbrella, that is more difficult at this moment. So basically now there is a pause in the system, but we are very committed to regain and to make sure that we pick up where we left. Yeah.
ئێستا وەزیری پێشمەرگە دەوام ناکە. پێتان وایە یەکێتی و پارتی ئەوەندەی لێرەن هەستان بۆ کردووە کە ئیرادەیەکی جددیان هەیە بۆ ڕێخستنەوە یەخستنەوەی هێزی پێشمەرگەی کوردستان و چاکسازی جددی و ڕیشەی لە نێوڕیزەکانی پێشمەرگە؟
Yes, I sincerely do. I think that both sides understand that this is really a necessity and that it is something that one important thing is we were asked by the Kurdish regional government to do this. So basically in the coalition with the Americans, with the Brits, the Germans and ourselves, we were asked by this government to work with them on Peshmerga reform. So that's an important aspect because that's where it comes from. Now I'm also still very, coming back to your question, I'm still very much committed to the fact that also both parties will see that in the end this is in their interest, because if you look at the bigger picture and you see, for instance, the issues that are there in federal Iraq, and then you look at Kurdistan compared to Baghdad and the government there, it is essential to speak as one voice. It is essential to be more united, and I think both parties see that. And then I'm not even talking about the fact that also for the regional stability, it's very much needed that the Kurdish people are united, and that I think both parties will, of course, see that and also act accordingly.
بەڵێ ئەگەر ئێستا لەگەڵ یەکێتی و پارتی کۆبنەوە چیان پێ دەڵێن لەسەر ئەو ناکۆکیانەی کە هەن لە نێوانیانە؟
I think it is not only in our interest but very much in the Kurdish interest to be united and to resolve differences. We have also quite clearly recently, when our Minister of Defense was visiting, we have indicated that we are committed to this Peshmerga reform and to the advisory role that we take in this program. But we've also quite clearly made it clear that we need the unity between the two parties to be able to carry out that task. Because if that environment is not there, then we have a very difficult task to do anything in an advisory role. I think what is at the core of diplomacy, when you look at what a diplomat does, is where you try to look for mutual ground. So we are trying to indicate that it is by far most important for the Kurdish and the Kurdistan region to be united, but it's also in our interest, because if Kurdistan is not a stable region, which by far it is at this moment within federal Iraq, then basically our interest, which are, for instance, on the front of migration, is also endangered. So we have a mutual interest here.
هەڵسەنگاندنی تازەتان بۆ هێزی داعش ئێستا لە عێراق چییە؟
Well, I believe that ISIS is not gone. We are, of course, in a very different situation than we were, let's say, 3-4 years ago. I'm not a military expert, I'm a diplomat, but I think that it is fair to say that the war was won, but we are not done yet. There is still, you see in many places that ISIS still rises up, and also we are still dealing with large numbers of ex-combatants or ISIS-affiliated people. And we need to make sure that we have the correct plans in place for instance, reintegration back into society, but also to be still very cautious about the violence rising up in certain areas. In that respect, we also stay very much committed to what needs to be done, and we are still very much a part of the coalition against ISIS.
قەبارەی هاوکاریەکانتان بۆ پێشمەرگە چەندە؟
Well, the volume of help here is limited to a senior advisory role. So we have a strategic advisor, a military advisor, and that is basically the military capacity that we put to that. Besides that, we have had for a number of years about 140 Dutch soldiers in Erbil at the airport. But that is not, those are not focused on Peshmerga reform. They are part of the OIS, so that is the coalition against ISIS. And we are going to phase that out from May next year onwards. So for the last few years we have had over 100 soldiers here, And from May onwards, we are going to slowly take them out, and a new coalition partner will probably take over that role.
ناوە هەرێمی کوردستان لەلایەن ئێرانەوە تۆپباران نەکرێت ناوچە سنووریەکانی تەنانەت ناوچە سفیلنشینەکانیش لە کۆی و شوێنەکانی دیکە. هەڵوێستی هۆڵەندا چیە لەسەرەوە سەو بردومانانەی ئێران بۆ سەر ناوچە سفیلنشینەکان و سەرخاکی هەرێمی کوردستان چ مەترسیەک دروستەکە لەسەر ئاسایش و سەقامگیری ناوچەکە؟
Well, we just spoke about the stability of this region, but then we were talking about the internal dynamics. You're now talking about the security that is basically coming from outside from the region, from other countries, or in this case Iran. We are very much trying to support this government in their cry out against these attacks. The Netherlands really believes in international law. We believe in the fact that a sovereign country has the right to protect itself. And because we are in support of these principles, we are also very much in support of a sovereign government that is denouncing and actually cries out against these attacks that come from abroad. And we try to support your government as much as possible in that sense.
دۆخی مافی مرۆڤ و ئازادی ڕادەربڕین و ئازادی ڕۆژنامەوانی لە هەرێمی کوردستان چۆنە لەسەنگێنی؟
Well, first of all, I think human rights is an extremely important topic. Also, this topic is something we speak about with the Kurdistan regional government. Especially here in this area where years and years of difficult situations, war, persecution of people has been played out. Human rights is of course an essential part of what needs attention, because human rights is of course about the protection of the most vulnerable. Those people that cannot protect themselves, they need especially to be protected by universal human rights. We believe very much in this principle. We also very much believe that it is essential, if you want to tackle corruption, for instance, that you adhere to these principles of human rights, because anybody that cries out to corruption and wants to call those accountable for corruption, they will meet a lot of power and a lot of resistance. And usually they are very vulnerable as well. So you need human rights to protect those people that want to fight corruption, because otherwise they will be vulnerable and prosecuted, for instance. Freedom of expression, the same, very important. We believe in free media. I think it is important that media can express itself in a very free manner, but there's always limits. And the limits, for instance, in the Netherlands, the limits of free expression is where somebody would call into people getting into violence or direct threats. The essence, I think, with that is that it is a third party in the end that needs to judge where these boundaries are. What is the actual limit of free expression? And that would be the judiciary. So the legal courts in a court case would have to establish if something is actually allowed or not. In a free democracy, I think these are essential elements to prosper and to make democracy work.
بەڵێ هەندێک جار نوێنەراتی وڵاتانی ئەوروپا لە هەرێمی کوردستان ڕاگەنراوی هاوبەشیانە بۆ ڕەخنەیان لە بابەتی ئازادی ڕادەربڕین بە تایبەتی ئازادی ڕۆژنامەوانی لە هەرێمی کوردستان هەبووە. ئەم نیگەرانیانە گەنراون بە حکوومەتی هەرێمی کوردستان. حکوومەتی هەرێمی کوردستان کاری کردو بۆ ڕەوانەوەی نیگەرانیەکانتان؟
Yes, I think so, because one of the most important things is that you talk to each other about these issues. What I have encountered up to now is that the Kurdistan regional government is they're receptive. They are able and willing to talk to us about these issues. When you're friends, which I think the Netherlands and Kurdistan are very much, we have a very friendly and we have a partnership. We are good friends in the things we try to accomplish. Friends can have criticism. Friends can be also sometimes not agreeing on every single detail. The question is, can you discuss it? Can you talk about these issues? And we can with the Kurdistan regional government. So there is a way of interacting, and we know we don't always agree. However, on many issues we do. But if we disagree, we find a friend on the other side that we can talk to and address our concerns.
بەڵێ حەزەکەم پرسیارێکیش لەسەر ڤیزا بکەم. بەدەستهێنانی ڤیزای هۆڵەندا زۆر قورسە. بۆ؟
That's true, because of the fact that we, at this current moment, we have only business visa. So we have, at this moment, not the opportunity for individual people to travel in terms of tourism. That is a policy decision at this moment. It is taken by our headquarters in The Hague. And there are other countries in Europe that do have tourist visa. We have made the decision not to do so at this moment. And that might change in the future. I have no idea. I cannot give you any guarantees, but it is part of a discussion that we have with both the government here and also with, of course, federal Iraq. But there are more issues to this question than just the visa question. It deals with a wider discussion about migration in general.